Wanted to start with you first. Horror is experiencing such an exciting renaissance as another medium to tell really cool and impactful stories, by included. The genre has this really sneaky quality of bringing timely and relevant themes to the forefront in such a subtle way. As you began penning this script, how early on did you know you wanted to include all of those elements as well as the supernatural and fantasy elements as well? Which I think is such a brilliant creative decision as opposed to just doing a straightforward drama.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it was really from the beginning where it was never really a drama in the beginning. It was always sort of this concept of this dark fantasy from the very beginning. I think I love genre. I'm a huge genre fan. If I take a step back, I think it's always been like the safe space to like explore like really dark
Yeah.
ideas and dark emotions and whatnot. If you watch a straightforward drama, it's not like dramas can't explore those spaces as well, but yeah, for me, genre is where it's at to just really go dark and, kind of dive into the depths of the human soul. I was actually talking to Pam Grady, who's a reporter at SF Chronicle, and she's like, your film kind of reminds me of the Brothers Grimm. And it took me a
Hmm.
second to kind of think about that because, we all know about the Brothers Grimm of today. They did Cinderella, all the modern fairy tales, and they sort of been Disneyfied and sanitized for children. But if you go back to the original stories that they wrote, these are stories that were being told just through spoken word that had survived centuries, not only in Europe, but throughout the whole world. There's like this rich history of fairy tales, and they were dark, they're ultra violent. They definitely be like rated R or more these days, like cannibalism, murder, just all these like really dark themes. And I think there's something that's real that speaks to the human condition that we crave these stories that are like really dark, to just explore feelings and ideas and spaces that we don't experience in everyday life, or maybe we will, but it's a way for us to like almost practice experiencing these really dark spaces and dark emotions. So yeah, I mean, I was really flattered that she made that comparison, and I think that's what we're trying to do a little bit in this film is to just use that as a canvas to go dark and go deep.
And Elizabeth, you share this really inspirational post on social media that, as we get older in life, life catches up with us, and the idea of making a passion project feels like such an impossible dream. But the two of you really willed this project into existence. What was it about Ben's script that hit home for you, and how did that guide you through the ups and downs of this production?
I think, um, you know, it, it really was Ben's script that spoke to me, but I think even more so than that is knowing who Ben is as a person. We've been friends for the last 15 years. I know his wife, his kids, and just really when we first met each other, it was just nerding out about films, being in a film fellowship together at Film Independent, and knowing him as a person and kind of the stories that he's always been interested in. Um, we've had so many conversations over the years about those interests that it was what already intrigued me about Ben's, you know, creativity, his imagination. And there were always these kind of like stories about the human condition that are, you know, in these sort of allegories. So you're going to have to dig a little deeper. You might be drawn in by like maybe the aesthetic, the world, the premise. But once you get really deep into that story, um, you're like, oh, this is a metaphor for so much more. So I
Mm.
guess in reading the script, it was uh, deeply heartfelt and at the same time felt very aligned in ways that still continuing to process as a mom myself. But when he first sent me the script, I was still a newish mom. I had a 1 year old. And when I started to read it, I was blown away by the emotional thread that ran through the entire script. And it wasn't just like, oh, it's this supernatural thing. It was a genre thing. It was horror. It was more like, this is a deeply personal story for Ben, and one that I
Yeah.
felt was very universal to me as a mom, right? Like he's like, I'm struggling as a dad when he was, these thoughts ran through his brain and he put it to paper. And then to read it as a parent as well was just like, oh, damn.
Mhm.
And especially, I think the next layer to that was the script moved me, but the next layer was we entered the end of times in the pandemic, which feels like a distant memory now. But at that time, it really helped the story take shape, because I think a lot of these existential questions became magnified in that time when we started to go into production.
And credit to your writing, Ben. I feel like this is a film that you could watch over and over again, and you learn new things with each watch. And I think one of the beautiful things about independent filmmaking is that you're able to take more risks. And somebody like Lawrence would have been historically overlooked for a role like this because he doesn't have that experience as a father, but he brought so much strength, vulnerability, and this empathetic quality to Daniel. Ben, what made Lawrence stand out during that audition process, and how were you able to share your own experiences as a father raising a child during the height of all these Asian hate crimes and instill that into him?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I remember during casting when he came, we saw his tape. He just popped, and he just felt I know he's not a dad, but he had this vibe to him that just felt like so many Cali dads. I just made
Mm,
that up. I don't know if that's a thing, but like Cali Asian dads, and he just felt like I'm like I know this guy. I have friends like this guy, and he just felt so authentic to like so many friends that I have, who are dads or not dads. And the more I learned about him, this story was actually largely inspired by something he did 15 years ago. He was on a show called America's Best Dance Crew, and that was for me, like back in like 2008. It was like a landmark show for me as an Asian
mm,
American, just to see like these Asians. It's a show that had the Jabberwockies, that had
yeah.
Lawrence's Dance Crew. You remember that show? Yeah. So at that time, I mean, we were like living in a wasteland of Asian representation. So to see these Asians come on screen and just kill it, be the best dancers, and be like sexy and all these things was just it was a huge moment for me. I remember. So Lawrence, as I said, he was on that show, and I didn't know it at the time during casting, but he actually, in the back of my mind, inspired a lot of the story because I just thought about his story and the
Mm.
story of a lot of artists in LA and in just in the creative field, and you can sort of be in the limelight for a moment, but what happens when that limelight goes away and you're still trying to make money to pay the bills, and especially if you have a daughter. So, I really feel like he was meant to play this role, and he just does a phenomenal job. We really put his character through the ringer in this film, as you can see.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was. I'm so grateful that we got to work with him, and he always just felt like he was the guy for this role.
That feels very full circle. And Elizabeth, change, particularly in this industry, is something that doesn't happen overnight. And it's storytellers and filmmakers like yourself, Ben and Bob, that are really pushing true inclusion and representation forward through the casting of this project. Also, the people that are working behind the scenes. How do you hope this project continues to open doors for our community? And what advice would you give aspiring filmmakers who feel like a career in this industry is out of reach?
Oh, I mean,
Mhm.
it still feels out of reach for me, for Ben. We talk about it. We're like, what did we just do? We spent years, and Ben especially, he's put everything into this. His family's in this film. My family's in this, my daughter's in this film. Like we just put so much into it. And when you say like, I think I think in a lot of ways it still is out of reach. That's the real talk, right? It
Mm,
is, you're like, who has these resources? Who has this time? And I did write a very personal social post because it's true. It felt so out of reach until you're like, well, you know what? Um, how am I going to be on my deathbed? I think that the morbid themes of the film come up, and you're just like, I want to not have these regrets. If this opportunity does arise, like it's a gift. um because it's not often that somebody comes along and says, here's this beautiful script, and we are going to be able to make this with our friends. There's funding in place. And and it felt more dire than ever when you're like, we're in COVID, why the fuck not? I could die literally at any moment, right? Just somebody coughing in the wrong way. And at that time, before we actually knew what it was or
mm.
had vaccines for it, it was just like I could die. And so, you know what, if this is the way it's going down, this is worth it to me right now. this is how it ends. It's not me just sitting in my house staring at four walls and wondering if this is how it ends in these four walls. So I guess it depends on where each person is on their journey, but it is really hard. It's really out of reach for the vast majority of people. So I don't know if I have something super inspirational, but when it does come to that moment, I hope that a door does open and somebody does receive the gift or the message that they get. And they're like, I'm ready to tell my story, whether it's writing a social media post or doing your TikTok or making this movie. I feel like there's so many ways to tell stories now. I'm not sure if the movie is the way to tell it. It just happens to be the way Ben and I met, and a lot of our friends that are telling stories are telling it. But in the last 15 years that we've known each other, so many other avenues have opened up. So I'm excited to see the stories that come about.
I feel like this film is a testament about taking creative control over your destiny. And Ben, as a writer director, I imagine you have such a strong sense of who these characters are. But when you cast your actors, you want them to bring their own interpretations to them. How did you create that space on set for your leads, Lawrence and Kai, to do that exploration and play?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it. I think it's filmmaking is a team sport. It's hugely collaborative, and there's a reason why we cast these amazing actors. It's because there's something that they have that they're able to bring to these roles. So it's not about me, trying to cram anything like down their throat. It's really just giving them the space, and I think every actor is different. I think some actors want a lot and they want to talk about it, and I want to support them in, I want to support each actor in what's best for them, and so support like what works best for them. So yeah, I mean, it'll just range from having conversations to like actually rehearsing and whatnot. I think it's just different with every actor. But I mean, I feel so lucky to work with the actors that we have, especially our leads, Kai and Lawrence, because they're just yeah, I was blown away by their performance. There were a lot of times where I almost had like an out of body experience, because when you're directing, you're sitting in front of the camera and you're concentrating so intently, you know, to give really notes for the next time, unless there's no notes. But there were times where I found myself having like an out of body experience, and they were just carrying the story, and I just found myself like swept up in their performance, and like in those fleeting moments, I was just watching the movie, and that was it, and it was beautiful. So, yeah, it's hugely collaborative, and I feel very lucky with the cast that we have.
Very poetic answer. And Elizabeth, Ba is making its way around the festival circuit now. And like you were just saying, yes, it's Asian led, but it is a universal story about parenthood and sacrifice. What has it been like getting to share this project with a live audience and seeing their reaction? And what's the future for this project?
I don't feel equipped to answer that question. Uh, but I definitely, you know, I think it's hugely gratifying. And I'm just going to have to pass the microphone back to Ben because, this is his huge labor of love. So Ben, yeah, how do you feel about this?
I'm excited to find out. I mean, we had a great premiere at CineQuest. But to be 100% honest, I'm eager to try to share it with more viewers. So hopefully that comes in the form of distribution and whatnot. So yeah, I it so to answer your question, I mean, it was hugely gratifying, but I guess there is this desire to share it with an even larger audience.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean is like this is such a huge privilege to be able to make it, but it feels like there's so many gatekeepers and things that
Mm.
we can't control in our industry. So the best thing that we can do is like continue to share, hope that we have opportunities like this to even talk to you and have a platform. Um, but it does feel like it's before you're like, it's so difficult, but it feels like there are less ways to be a part of the film industry every day, right? You see things pop up, but then you're like, with all of the industry things, I don't want to get into the business of it all, but like the mergers, the acquisitions, the, players that, go belly up. You read about that every day and you try to stay optimistic. And so I guess in terms of the like reception with the few that I've had a chance to see it, it's gratifying. With what the future holds, I'm like, I'm not sure. I hope that people receive it, embrace it, and the people that we made this movie for love it.
Yeah. I feel like this project is going to have such a great run on the festival circuit, and there will be distribution. Above all, it's a good quality film that people need to see. And Ben, the cinematography and the color grading is so immersive and really elevates your writing. How's your visual background aided you as you made your directorial debut?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been a visual person, but I have to give credit to our team. Ming Dre Hugh, our cinematographer, Robert Crosby, our colorist. I mean, they're artists within their own right, and I was just there to say yes, no. I mean, they're masters of their craft. So again, I think I give them so much credit in terms of just creating that world and creating that palette, that immersive palette. Um, I mean, I would say creatively, we had just talked about making things surreal, and we're sort of writing this balance between having things realistic as versus fantastical, and there was always this desire to like use colors, use light to just push us more into the surreal world, and I think they did an amazing job of that. So.
Yeah, it's breathtaking to watch. I got one final question for the both of you. I feel like this is going to be such an exciting chapter in both of your careers and open so many doors outside of this project. What's next for each of you?
Next, well, I'm making my directorial debut soon. I've been
Yeah.
working on New Wave for a long time, and I'm really excited to share that with the world. It's a very personal documentary and very much inspired. I told Ben this, privately, but I was just like, man, I didn't know how important Ba would be to the foundation of the story that I wanted to tell. Um, New Wave. So there's more in store. I won't take any time for that, but just that, these parenthood stories, these multi-generational stories are so significant right now. And I think that's kind of like what's on the horizon. What does the future hold? I hope that it's that we're having bigger conversations about that intergenerational dialogue. And I think that's
Mm,
what Ba achieves with the parent child relationship, the father daughter relationship, that we don't see those depictions of our
yeah.
people. And I want to see more of them. We're not just I won't preach to the choir here, but the the stereotypes that we're trying to move away from, and a part of that is like seeing in Ba, you know that Asians suffer too, from all kinds of afflictions. And how do we overcome that? And how do we, leave the world a little bit better for the next generation? I think that's what's next for me, is I keep pushing this narrative, but also in all of the work that I do. Um, yeah, that's what I hope for.
Yeah, and I've been writing, been starting to pick up the pen again, and I got I honestly I have too many ideas and just not enough time. So yeah, but it's great to get back into the writing. It feels just really creative, and now having gone through this first feature, I just have so much more insight into like what works, what doesn't work, how to
Mm.
best tell a story. So it's exciting to jump back in.